Hello, everyone. Happy Pride. My name is Nevin Capel, and my pronouns are she, her, and I am the founder of Return on Inclusion. First, I want to thank each and every one of our esteemed panelists for joining us today, and also the WBCA for hosting and organizing. This is the third and final installment of the LGBTQ panel called Helping Out, and it's been a series over the past 3 years, just in honor and celebration of Pride Month. So thank you to the WBCA. I also want to say thank you to Shimmy Gray Miller for her outstanding work, just organizing the panel. And I know she's worked with some of her colleagues on the Diversity and Inclusion Committee as well. So thank you all for making this a priority. This panel was actually originally scheduled to take place at the convention this year. But since we obviously didn't have it, we're having it now. And if you do want to see the previous two panels, it is available if you go to WBCA.org. It is in their coaching library. So the one thing that the last thing I want to say before I introduce our panelists, if you are comfortable, I invite you to add your pronouns to your Zoom name in your profile. And the reason I say that is I think sometimes it's helpful to let folks know that we recognize there are identities and cultures that kind of exist beyond us, beyond me. So this is one way that we can let our young people know that we see them. So just kind of going into who we have with us today. First, we have Cheryl Reeve, who is the general manager and head coach of the Minnesota Lynx. So Cheryl, thank you for joining us today. Next, we have Stephanie Ellison, who is the Senior Associate Athletics Director and SWA at Clemson. And Stephanie, I'm so glad and honored that you were able to join us as well. Kevin DeMille, who is an assistant coach at George Washington University. And Kevin, it's great to see you. I'm feeling the stash. And Tempie Brown, former NCAA Division I assistant coach. Tempie, I'm so glad that you are able to join us as well. I can't think of a better time to bring these thought leaders together and really be hosting a panel like this, especially as we celebrate Pride Month. Our country is in the midst of both a global pandemic and one of the largest racial justice uprisings in most of our lifetimes. And I find peace in the solidarity as many of our young people are really finding their voice in the movement. I think out of the rage comes a lot of acceptance and healing, as we have these discussions about what matters the most today. And so there's an opportunity here in this hour that we have together to really be able to lean into, some of our questions, some of our discomfort, some of the questions that we possibly have about bringing the community together and really support each other across our differences. So thank you for joining us. So Cheryl, I'm going to start with you. We're in 2020, and I know that there's still a bit of a stigma attached to LGBTQ inclusion in women's basketball, and especially, as an out for our out lesbian head coaches and gay men as well. What can we do as a coaching community to really be able to eradicate some of that stigma and support each other in the community?
I would say that first off, the most important thing is that we not stay silent. Us as role models for the younger generation, being comfortable with who we are, also understanding, that sports is a microcosm of society, and we are still fighting for equality. We have Supreme Court legislation, that sort of thing. We are still fighting for the opportunity to have the same rights as heterosexuals. And so it's a difficult world to navigate, especially for young people. What they need to be able to see is people like myself who can speak on my sexuality, be comfortable, be open, that I have a wife, that I have a child, and that if I see something, I say something. I hold people accountable. No, I will say this didn't come quick or easy. The generation that I grew up in, it was very much, the idea that you just didn't speak on your sexuality. I never have come out to my parents, so to speak. I just lived my life and just hoped that they would kind of get with the program. But I saw when I got older I wish my path was different. But we live in a different time now. And so societal norms are slowly changing. And so I think that we have to make sure that we continue to speak on it and being comfortable And the more open we are, the more we, quote, normalize things for our heterosexual communities. And I think that's probably the best thing we can do.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Coach. Yeah, I think the more that we can kind of lift up role models such as yourself and show the next generation that this is a way that you can kind of be out and thrive and normalizing, our experiences as humans, the more that we can start to really eradicate some of the stigma. So thank you for sharing that.
Yep.
Kevin, I know as one of the few out men in women's basketball, it can't always be easy, and so can you walk us through your decision to be out publicly and why it's so important to you?
Yeah, similar to Cheryl, I never really came out publicly as a coach. I mean, I came out to my family and my friends before I got into coaching. And that to me, in order to stay authentic and to be as good a coach and colleague and teammate and employee and mentor that I could be, I had to be my most authentic self. So I had to take who I was as an out gay man into my profession. For a long time, I didn't really feel a need or a compulsion to be a mentor or a role model to other gay men, because I really wanted to be a really good coach. I wanted to focus my attention on that. And that even felt inauthentic. And so working with young people, I think is the most powerful way to realize your own authenticity, to give them the opportunity to be themselves by showing them role models who are just being themselves. I think it's so powerful that our players have an ability to look up to people around them and see, exactly who they want to be, or living a life in the way that they want to live it.
Mm-hmm.
There are lots of ways I can't relate to my players. I'm not a woman. I'm a cis white man. And so I'm fortunate, I think very fortunate, that me being a gay man gives me a little bit of opportunity to occupy some space with them, a space where I'm not afforded the same rights as everybody everywhere. And that I can not only lend my ability to be somebody who does fit into a more stereotypical crowd to them. I can lift their voices, I can amplify them. And I've been lucky that I've been around really supportive people. Mm-hmm. My boss at GW is one of the greatest minds in the game, but probably the greatest person in the game. And Jen is such a familial person. She is so family oriented with our team and with our program. And so me being who I am is not only important to our team and our program, but it's really important to our players. And to me, I think that's like the greatest gift.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin. Tempie, so last week, the Supreme Court just ruled that Title VII prohibits workplace discrimination, especially on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. How do you think that this particular ruling will impact women's basketball coaches and change or shift some of the stigmas that we see about being out in women's sports?
Well, I think the shift has to take place with the people in charge. Mm-hmm. And I think as Cheryl and Kevin have both said, we are being authentic and being mentors and showing the way, but the legislation in place kind of feels like somebody's got your back. I think we should all celebrate, like we did gay marriage, that this legislation passed. I think we should also be aware that it takes time for the people in charge to actually implement the legislature, because we're still talking about Stonewall. The unrest we have right now is based on legislation that passed a long time ago that people still don't live up to. Mm-hmm. So while I want to be happy, because I think there was a time we thought this might be a problem, and we were all surprised when we could have this kind of protection. But in coaching, it's still up to us when and how and where we come out. And with our profession, we move from one place to another. So who's willing to fight the fight? So we are happy and I'm proud, but we also have to be cautious and smart and diligent about being open and true to the people above us, because those are the people who are putting forth any sort of guidelines in place. Because even though it may not be about your sexuality, it could be about something else. It becomes an issue about something else. So again, happy, be smart about what you're doing, and surround yourself with the people here and others who can help us in this fight, because it's not over. Mm-hmm. It's not over.
Mm-hmm. That's such an important point, Tempie. I think when we think about the LGBTQ movement and the reason why we've gotten so far, you know, a lot of it stems from personal relationships. And I think at the core of a lot of the challenges I see are really religious differences and beliefs. But what I'm really encouraged by is now I think a lot of folks are realizing that we don't have to believe and think the exact same things in order to accept each other across those differences. So, you know, even as we think about the Supreme Court decision, a lot of that comes back to how we value our LGBTQ loved ones and the relationships that I, as a lesbian woman, has with the straight people in my life. So, you know, we're going to continue to see a lot of progress just as a result of many of those relationships being cultivated. So thanks, Tempie. Stephanie, great to finally get to you. I've heard so many great things about you, and I really want to think and talk a little bit about some of the great work you've done at Clemson. I know you hired, or Clemson actually hired the first, I want to say 2 out coaches in back-to-back years. It was a volleyball coach and a basketball coach. So I wanted to find out a little bit more about that process. And was it the type of thing where you knew in advance that these coaches identified as LGBTQ, or is it something that maybe they weren't comfortable disclosing and later you found out? Can you tell us a little bit more about that process and how you've supported them?
Yes, absolutely, Nevin. You know, in the beginning, we did not say we want to go out and hire a lesbian coach. Obviously, that was not how our process began. But on the onset of our search process, we made a decision that we were going to go out and hire the best coach for the program and a great fit for Clemson. And in doing that, you know, obviously the candidates came across our desk and yes, they were out. And I have to say, as an administrator, that, and I appreciate what Kevin said, what Cheryl, what Tempie, you guys have said, and understanding that it is a personal choice to be out. But as an administrator, that allowed us during the process, and particularly at the end when we were about to select candidates, because the individuals were out, we were able to spend more time in addressing their qualifications for the job, as opposed to spending time addressing rumors, honestly, to say, here are the merits of why they're qualified to do the job that we've asked or what we were searching for, and not have to spend a lot of time addressing rumors. In regards to, you know, bringing them into our program, into our community, because no, it is not something that had been done again at Clemson, and understanding Clemson is a very small college town in the South, in the Bible Belt, and known for very conservative views. But one of the things that we do, you know, here at Clemson with all things is we sell our people. And again, the 2 priorities that we started the search for, you know, was we want the best coach. And the second thing is we have great people here within our department, knowing that our department will be the day-to-day support for the coaches coming in. Again, being in a small town, our department makes up a lot of our community. Knowing the people that we have at our university and in our community to provide that additional support. But at the end of the day, we were also very realistic, and knowing that wherever you go, there are going to be bad people. But at the end of the day, we leaned on the individuals within our department and knowing the support that we would provide to those individuals and to their families. And at the end of the day, I can truly say it has made our department a much better place, because a lot of times people go in, you know, they have a certain mindset. And I think it's been said before, once you really take the time to get to know people, you change your perspectives. And you don't put labels on people of what you think they are or who they are, that you generally get a chance to know the individual. So.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stephanie. And I guess kind of coupled with that question, and I'll open it up to Cheryl as well. When we think about coaches, and especially while they're in the hiring process, oftentimes they end up choosing between their sport and their family. They have to choose whether or not, you know, it's okay to self-disclose during that process. And so do you have any advice in terms of what coaches can really look for from an institution that supports LGBTQ employees like Clemson, or Is there something that administrators and hiring managers can proactively share, just so that, you know, coaches can say, hey, Clemson is a place that I want to work, even if they aren't familiar with anybody else that's on staff already?
Me or Stephanie, or both?
Either one. Yes.
Yeah.
Cheryl, you can start us off.
You know, it was just so interesting listening to Stephanie. I'm 20 years removed from coaching college athletics, and it's fascinating to hear the culture. I'm in a culture in the WNBA where literally your sexuality is never talked about. It's not an issue. It's not something that you get a resume, that there's any kind of consideration around that. It is one of the greatest things about coaching professionally, is that authenticity. Everyone gets to be themselves, and that means a lot of things. The safe and inclusive environment that is the WNBA, you know, besides coaching, you know, some of the greatest athletes in the world, that is probably the single biggest thing for me that changed my life. And in hearing, you know, reminding, you know, being reminded of what exists in the culture of NCAA collegiate athletics, it takes me right back to being on the recruiting trail and going against, you know, teams that perhaps use some catchphrases, you know, against you, you know, because the rumor, because you certainly, there's challenges with being out. If you are out, that's used against you in recruiting. And what I would say to all that, I'm probably veering off of what your original question is. I have so much on my mind with regard to this, that you have to align yourself with people that have the values that Stephanie expressed, right? It is a hard thing to do, but you have to make those hard decisions. You know, we also have to change the leadership. We need greater representation in leadership positions. That's how we're going to get meaningful change across many of the isms that there are. This is no different. We need representation. You know, we have to move away from white male leadership that's making these decisions. That you know, you have sexism, the heterosexism nature of this for women. There's the holding down. This is holding women down. This is a form of that. And we have to hold administrators accountable. Hard to do, right? Hard to do, because we go into self-preservation. You know, we worry about our jobs. And it didn't come to for me till later in life, when you hit that point. And I know, Tempie, I don't know how old you were when you got there, but you go, I don't give two bleeps. If I can't work here, I can't work here. I'm going to be myself, and I'm going to find a place that's going to allow me and celebrate diversity. You know, Stephanie, you mentioned your department became a better department. Diversity of thought, representation of you know, whether it's in race or gender, you know, sexual identity. It's just so important. Those are the best companies. Those are the ones that thrive. So I'm not surprised, you know, to hear that that's how it worked out at Clemson. But I would say the biggest thing, you know, if I could not be myself in so many ways, I could not remain an employee of that organization. Very simply, I'm a little more secure now. When I'm in my 20s and 30s, I didn't necessarily feel that way, because I didn't know. You know, I wish I had someone pushing me at that age to be confident in who I was and to not live a closeted life. I missed 20 years of being able to celebrate who I am as a person, and have my family celebrate and my friends celebrate. You know, you have it just, you know, it's very unfortunate. And if we could change that about college athletics, it just, the overall quality of it. Kevin, you said something so important, to be the best version of yourself for the student athletes. We all want that, right? So the student athletes can be the best versions of themselves. We have to be the best versions of ourselves. I think back to my student athletes when I coached, they didn't know me. And I just think how, you know, that's such a difficult thing when I replay those years as a college coach.
And Cheryl, I just wanted to jump in, because I think you touched on a very important point, and that's changing what the leadership looks like. You know, a lot of times we, you know, if people in leadership roles all look the same, all think the same, they continue to do the same things. And I know over the years for me, changing also what diversity looks like. I think we spent a lot of time, it's like diversity is only focusing on race. And then there's a point, well, oh, now we're going to focus on gender. And we kind of silo the steps we're going to take instead of looking at trying to create that big picture of what diversity, what inclusion looks like. So I definitely wanted to touch on that, because at the end of the day, to provide these opportunities to different individuals, the leadership has to look different.
Stephanie, what do you think it would take to, I guess, diversify the leadership, in terms of thinking about this is what needs to happen in order for the community, the leadership team to be reflective of the student athletes that we're bringing into the community? What does it take to get there? And not just Stephanie, I know I put a lot on you. So if anybody wants to contribute, you're welcome to.
I was going to say, if I had the answer to that, I would be a very right now. But honestly, I think it starts with mentorship. We have to grow our pool. For me, if it had not been for the individuals before me that said, I'm going to give this individual, this student who has no idea from what the athletic world is, an opportunity to start somewhere. And I feel like over the years, we've lost a lot of those mentoring and pulling people up, teaching people, because a lot of times at the administrative level, when positions come open, it's like, well, there's not a large pool, or we're only selecting from this group. And I just feel personally that we need to kind of start back at that mentoring level, growing the pool, preparing individuals. I mean, we've all been in a situation, whether we were a part of the search committee or we were the candidate, where it was like, oh, well, they didn't interview well, they didn't have enough experience. And so I think it's important to, again, mentor, add people to the pool, and just help them build themselves so that when those opportunities come along, they're prepared for them.
I think another really big thing is while we are sort of maybe stuck with white male leadership as the majority, until we can move the needle with regard to greater representation, I have taken on this position that we have to educate those leaders. We have to call out when we hear or see something that is inappropriate from them as a leader. So having courage to be able to do that. And it is a long, hard process that feels like nothing gets through. But this is where I go back to the first comment that I made, was we can't stay silent, because silence is acceptance. And so that, I think about, in 2016 with our team and the police officer involved shootings, the murders of Philando Castile and Alton Sterling moved us to take a position, to use our voices and to demand justice and accountability. And we made white leaders very uncomfortable. And some of the words that we chose, and just 3 words, Black Lives Matter, in 2016 was such a lightning bolt, so to speak, that we knew that we were not going to be denied that moment to use our voices. I told our captains that it would require a great deal of courage, because in pushing for change, you're going to get some people that aren't going to agree with you. And so I think that when I look now to 2020 as an example, completely different, the same organization, different leadership, but the same organization is using Black Lives Matter in their press releases. They're using words that I believe we help educate about. And the same thing is true when it comes to heterosexism, sexism, that we do a lot of the teaching. And so I think any chance we get, we all have voices, we all have social media platforms, using our voices, and not letting anyone tell you that, that you shouldn't be able to do that. If you have an organization that frowns upon those things because you want equality or equity, I would say that you probably need to align with a different organization. but taking every chance we get to teach. Just like when we get older, you start teaching your parents. I think it's the same thing when it comes to some of the leadership.
Sure, those are incredible points. And I just kind of want to touch upon something you mentioned about really being supportive of the student athletes or the young people where they are. And, even in the racial justice movement, I think one of the things that we're seeing right now is a lot of schools are putting out anti-racism statements. And it's great, the young people see it, but what's happening behind the scenes? How are they being supported after that? And I'll throw it out to the whole panel. In what ways can we consider or continue to support our young women, especially at the intersections of race and gender? Half of our women's basketball student athletes are women of color. So how do we encourage or show up for them in a way where we can advocate for them and they know that they're not in it alone?
Well, if I can add here, I think Cheryl kind of hit using your voice. I think for our student athletes, they first look to their coaches, whether it's Kevin or Cheryl or myself, to say, what are they thinking? And is it okay for me to say certain things or think a certain way? And they may say it with their peer group, but they might not be as comfortable in the circle of the team. And I think that's where coaching comes in to say, hey, let's talk about this. So where are you as a group? And I think Cheryl's been a great example of that. Where are you as a group? And here's where I am. And I may have some questions. And I think that's being authentic and bringing everything to light, because then you give your student athletes, you say, hey, you're important to me. Your thoughts are important to me. What you feel and however you think about this, because you've, at least with women's basketball, there's 15 players there that may or may not be thinking the same way. They may be on a different spectrum, but that's how you create change. I think we're relating to people in charge changing, but there's also the student athletes. There are some players that come from different backgrounds that may not even understand, why is this such a big deal right now? And then you have your other student athletes that are, out there in the protest. Mm-hmm. So same thing with your choice and who you love. Some people are out, some people aren't. And I think once the coaching staff and the people in the administration can show what you think is valid, what you think is meaningful, and let's just put it out there and be a role model, I think that allows your student athlete to feel comfortable in their own skin in your environment.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I think being out and authentic gives you a sense of trust with your student athletes. And so having these conversations can be a little bit easier. There's not been anything easy or comfortable about the conversations that we've been having, but hopefully they've been progressive and moving towards progress. To most leadership, I'm not intimidating, maybe with the exception of this new mustache I am, but in most cases, somebody who looks like me is not intimidating. And so I've shared this with my team. I've shared it with other colleagues at GW. I've shared it with our staff that I've always felt like my responsibility to our student athletes is to amplify their voices, to get my foot in the door so they can speak, so that we can have conversations about how they're feeling and what they think needs to change. And I use my privilege and my opportunity that's not afforded to them to step in and then usher them in the door as well. So I think that's an easy way. We've had a lot of conversations and some of our white student athletes have been very concerned about what can I do? How can I be part of this conversation and not take up space that doesn't belong to me? One of the ways I've found to be the most successful so far is to just amplify the voices who do need to be heard right now. And so we've had our student athletes, particularly our student athletes of color and our Black women on our team, who have done tremendous work in preparing educational content or putting out social media things that I'm so fortunate that I get to help them do. So that to me is my greatest role and responsibility, is to lift them up, not just on the court, but in who they are off of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Kevin. So I guess shifting gears just a little bit, back to helping out. One of the biggest challenges that I hear a lot just being on campus and working with different coaches and administrators is how to manage dating on the team and dating in relationships. And so I want to throw it out to you all, and anybody's welcome to jump in. But are there any best practices or things that are working extremely well when it comes to, really not only encouraging young people to be who it is that they are, but also understand what it means to be in a healthy relationship?
I was at Stanford. I think there's a couple of things that stuck out for me. David Shaw had a woman come in, and I'm sure you've all heard of her. Her tagline is "Set the Expectation." And it was about dating and how football players and the sexual culture gets out of hand at times. And he put that in place so that the players would go through it in the preseason, and a game was set the expectations, the T-shirts. So the message was out there that, hey, kind of the violent dating culture is not something we want for our team. I also think when freshmen come on campus, we would talk about not our team, but as a whole to the freshmen about positive relationships completely, not gay or straight, just in general, how to be positive in your communication and your behavior in relationships, how to understand when you're in a bad situation, and then what are the avenues you can do or who you can go to help you. So I think when you put those things out there and don't just separate out gay relationships, you actually help people in general be authentic with what is a good relationship, which also helps your team. But identifying those little triggers that say, hey, maybe this isn't the right thing, and give them coping mechanisms to get out of them. Those are things we've done at Stanford.
Great. Thanks, Tempie.
Sure.
Anyone else?
We do some of the same things. We bring in folks from campus and some folks like you, Nevin, to our athletic department to talk about the importance of positive and healthy relationships. And like Tempie said, not gay or straight, sometimes not even romantic, but relationships with parents and friends and teammates, because all of those can kind of have an impact on your team and your athletic performance. We just talk a lot about providing resources for our student athletes to access people who can help them navigate those relationships. And their priority when we recruited them to GW is to get a great education and to play basketball, and that we're going to help them become really successful young women by whatever means we can. And so we just want to provide them with as many resources as possible without putting it out there and talking necessarily gay or straight and singling people out, but just saying we want to provide whatever resources we can to help you be a great player, be a great student, achieve your goals off the court, and have healthy relationships.
What happens when, in terms of managing the conflict? So, things are going well for a while. And when I say relationships, I mean, there's all kinds. There could be friendships, and there's an issue or, a fight that causes a rift in the team. There could be two teammates who are dating. There could be, a man from the football team dating two women on the women's basketball team. There's all kinds of, relationship dynamics. So, everything tends to be fine if things are good, the relationship is solid. But then when there's conflict and it kind of has a ripple effect to the rest of the team, I think a lot of folks are struggling with what to do then. So does anybody have any suggestions on how to really be able to manage that conflict when it does arise? No. All right. Well, I will add to some of the things I've already said. I think in terms of looking at relationships in the context of all relationships is extremely important, because we're talking about 18 to 22-year-olds, right? And so they're leaving home for the first time. They're on college campuses. They're exploring, new parts of their identity. Their sexuality is just one part of the whole person. So giving them the opportunity to really kind of step up and step into this new role. But it's important to also put some boundaries around what the expectations are and really kind of breaking it up. You have your team time over here, and these are the expectations while you're on the court or in the locker room or in the hotel room or on the bus. No excessive PDA, no kissing, no hand holding or whatever it is to really express that, because you're on team time. You can do that on your personal time, and really kind of helping them understand what the expectations are, teaching them the same way that we teach them other team expectations. One of the biggest challenges I know is, especially in the hotel room, coaches really struggle with, what do I do if I know that two athletes are dating and I'm responsible for making sure that they're resting and, you know, they're not doing anything that they shouldn't be doing on team time. My recommendation would be to rotate roommates, because one of the challenges or the issue is if you have a no dating on the team rule, and that can be stated or implied, but it's implied if you're not rooming people together just because they're dating. But if you have that rule, then it disproportionately affects only the lesbians on a women's team and then only the gay men on a men's team. So if you coach a gendered team and this rule only affects the lesbians, then that could kind of open, you know, the team and the program up for potential ramifications. So, you know, it's important that that as we're doing this, there might be a time when these two athletes room together, but helping them understand where their loyalty is, where their responsibility is ahead of time, and what the expectation is will help offset or alleviate, you know, some of the more serious challenges. If a conflict does arise, you know, I would manage it the way that you do any other expectations on the team. First with mediation, sitting down with them, helping them understand why they can't do whatever it is that they did. And then, you know, if it comes down to it and it continues, then we can explore what some other options are. But the biggest opportunity is using it as a teachable moment and helping them grow from it. And then also on the other side, making sure that you're not risking any sort of liability issues with the program. So. All right, so I guess, you know, I want to hear some more from you all in terms of really moving forward and creating a women's basketball community that normalizes, you know, LGBT coaches and no longer, you know, makes many of coaches feel as though they can't be who they are or they have to compartmentalize their lives. What does the future of women's basketball look like? You know, what do we need to do? Who do we need to bring into the conversation to really be able to navigate this space and make it inclusive of everyone across our differences?
I see a generation, a younger generation with a great deal of courage. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the panelists said this, that, you know, some of the education comes from the student athletes. So I'm encouraged by that in what I'm seeing. And so I think that we have the ability now to understand so much more if we take moments to listen, to read, to know our history, you know, where we came from, you know, particularly as it pertains to women and opportunities, Title IX, you know, the younger generation. You know, my players, you know, as they come into the league, so many don't know Title IX. You know, they only know having sports the way it is today. So understanding our history, where we came from, and drill down even further to understand what inequities look like. When I go back and I think about my college time back in the 80s, long time ago, as a young person, you don't understand. You just, it's what you were conditioned to know. You were conditioned to know that you were less than, and you just accept it. That's what you did. You didn't rattle the cage. You just did what you're supposed to do. There was this fear of retribution. You say too much. You know, we see it in women's college coaching. You know, if a coach speaks up too loud, too often, you know, then there are consequences. I think that, you know, through the education, through speaking up, through holding people accountable, the use of social media, having courage to do those things, coupled with this generation, I think that the courage and the powerful nature of this group, I think can lead to a far more inclusive environment. And I think it will lead to more women choosing coaching as a profession, because it's hell. To be very honest with you, to be a you know, to be a female, to be a lesbian, and to have to live a closeted life is not something that people are going to choose for very long. You know, we're going to choose environments that are safe and inclusive because there are many more than what there used to be. And so I think if NCAA college athletics wants to truly improve upon these numbers where, we have more women in coaching, that this might be one of the greatest paths to get there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Cheryl.
And I would add that, continuing with opportunities like this, opportunities for conversation and the opportunity to have dialogue. I've learned so much today in listening to the other panelists, having the opportunities to work with the coaches that I have here and to learn. But one thing I would encourage is, let's take these conversations outside of this group. How can we, begin having more strategic conversations with administrators? And, you mentioned the NCAA. Let's continue, because I feel like we're at a great point in time right now where people are truly and genuinely open to listening, and let's have what has traditionally been uncomfortable conversations that people are more receptive to. Let's just talk about this.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd like to add too that it seems like this could be a tipping point as well, and it's bringing in our straight allies to help us as well. I have a ton of straight friends that, well, what can I do when we're talking about police brutality and the racism issue right now? I need you to do the same thing. Like Cheryl said, you have to speak up if there's something that's said about a gay lifestyle, because we need everyone to be supportive of our growth. So it's not just us, it's not just the people here, it's the people outside of here who can help us with this whole swelling. Because again, much like the protest, this is another tipping point where we can have change right now.
Mm-hmm. Tempie, when you talk about allyship, one of the challenges that I see sometimes is LGBT coaches feeling like they have to go kind of above reproach in order to support their LGBT student athletes. So for instance, they're very careful about not supporting them or about supporting them too much, and then trying not to have all eyes on them, saying that they're doing too much to advocate for just the LGBTQ players. So are there is there anything that you can share, or any support that or encouragement that you can provide in terms of helping coaches navigate that space?
I think we've all had great examples of, again, being authentic and opening the door, like Kevin said, to these conversations. Just like most people would say, well, I'm responsible for all the minority kids on the team. It's not like that. We're responsible to all kids, and we're responsible to all the women on the team and all the players. So even if a player is not gay, doesn't mean I can't talk to them about relationships. So I think as coaches, the big R always comes up, right? When we're recruiting them, they want a relationship with us. Well, the relationship comes from authenticity. And that means we can get to a level to talk about all things. And then eventually kids will open up to you. I think, like Cheryl said, this generation is way far beyond where I was years ago. They will talk to you about where they are and where they're struggling if they feel you are open to it. So you have to present yourself as someone they can talk to, and that you'll listen to what they're saying. Have the conversation, have the tough conversations over and over.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I feel like the authenticity is so important. We've got on our staff, we're pretty socially aware. I'm very lucky to work in a place and to work for somebody who values that. But we try to, as much as we can, to just provide our student athletes with opportunity. So I'll mention to our team that I'm attending a gay pride rally in DC, or we've got other folks on our staff who will mention to our team that they're attending church services, or they're going to this event, or they're participating here, to give our players the opportunity to say, you know what, I would like to do that too. It's like, it's safe for me to do that too. I can go with you just to be there, just to witness it and to participate. And so like I said, I'm really lucky that I get to work in a place that values that from all members of our athletic department. And then I think we have enough time and responsibility to advocate for everybody. Like Tempie said, I don't just advocate for or have relationships with the LGBT members of my team. I have relationships with everybody in our program. And so we have a responsibility to use each other and use each other's voices to really help amplify and protect everybody.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So one of the other things that I think also, a lot of coaches are struggling with in terms of recruiting, how, let me think of the best way to ask this. If a coach is on a recruiting visit with the family and they ask, are there any LGBTQ coaches on staff or any players on the team, have, in any of your experiences, have you had that question come up, and how have you addressed it or responded to it, or is there something that you might have done differently?
I would say, and it's 20 years ago, it came up a lot. And this is one thing I'd want to say, that I think that coaches have to do better. Straight women coaches, male coaches have to do better in the language we use, the innuendos. Whether that will happen, I don't know. There's a competitive nature to what we do, but this feels way out of bounds. I know that for me, I felt comfortable. I too worked at George Washington at a time when Joe McEwen was our leader, and we talked about being in a visit and likely going to hear that come up from parents. I remember one home visit like it was yesterday, and it was said to us who we were recruiting against was using this, and then you get the question, how many on your staff, how many on your team? And the very comfortable answer, so as an assistant coach, and then when I became a head coach, I wish I could go back to those days as a head coach and say me, and be comfortable. Again, the regrets that I have, because they didn't get the best version of me, and they never got to know me, my fullest self. And so I think that very simply, there's a broad answer that is part of the closeted nature of this, is that you would say, well, it's just like anything in life. You're going to have, gays, you're going to have, whether you're a doctor or whether you're an athlete, and you kind of just do this kind of, paint over it idea. I just think that, for me, I now would respond with a question back. Is that important to you? Does this affect your decision? Because I want to know, because I'm not sure if I would want that student athlete in my program if it was indeed a problem. Now, what I found on the home visit that I spoke of was that the parents had a problem, and the parents are trying to protect their children from these predators as they go off to college. And I can tell you that without fail, anyone that asked those questions and we didn't get, I was relieved that we weren't having them in our program. The kids without fail also would always bring up on the next call, I'm so sorry, that my parents, brought that up, that doesn't matter to me. So that's that's a part of coaching. I wish that I could tell you, winning championships at GW and being ranked 6th in the country and all that was wonderful. But honestly, I look back on my collegiate career and I don't have the best of feelings around, who I was not permitted to be and this culture. And I hope that it's different now. Again, that was 20 years ago. So hopefully Kevin and Tempie can share different stories, more positive stories.
Yeah, I haven't been recruiting as long as Tempie has, but what I can say is that I'm lucky that I'm in a place where we don't really have to have the conversation because we've made our statement. We hosted a Pride game earlier this year. We've made our social media channels very obvious as to where we stand, and including all of our student athletes. When it comes to Pride, when it comes to Black Lives Matter, when it comes to women and women's empowerment, we're pretty out there. We're very lucky that we get to be progressive and make it known that anybody who wants to play basketball at GW can come in and play basketball at GW. Mm-hmm. And so I'm lucky in that way. And I know a lot of coaches in the industry who have a personal social media accounts and they're coaching social media accounts. I don't have that. I'm pretty appropriate with what I post on social media, but I post my social life to my social media. And so that does include photos and videos and content of me and my boyfriend and me and at gay pride events, and that sort of speaks for itself. So I haven't gotten the question yet, but I don't know that I've kept it open to any questions either.
I'd have to agree. I think social media has allowed us to our story is out there long before you go into someone's home. But over the course of my career, I have had that question. And Cheryl, like you, I've given the broad answer initially. And then just recently, again, maybe it's age, but I simply said, yes, I have a wife and I have 2 children, by the way. And somebody please help me with them, which I say to everyone. So I think at least now it feels, and maybe the people around me, again, who I'm very comfortable with, who support me 100%, if they are positive behind me, then that's what counts. And I think, again, if these are people who you are recruiting and their parents aren't there yet, because that is a different generation. Sometimes other coaches aren't there yet. It still goes on, Cheryl. I promise you, it still goes on, the negative recruiting. And there are people out there who may choose not to attend a school with a gay coach. That happens. But that's not the coach. That's not the kid you're supposed to coach, ultimately. So I think if we can give young coaches the ability to say who they are and know that they have support, at least from us 5 right here, then that's a start, because they will experience it, I promise you, once they can get back out and recruit again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you all. And Cheryl, I just want to touch on something you said. You are living your the best version of yourself now. So, I just thank you for kind of paving the way for all of us, or most of us, to be able to do that now. The other thing too, when we think about LGBTQ people, oftentimes we carry the weight and the stories and the burden, the shame and the guilt from everybody that we're close to. And so when we think about the cycle of socialization, it's much later in life. So as we think about even our college student athletes who are entering the space, they're exploring these different parts of our identity. Sometimes we might just think that they're, out of control. And in some cases they are, but in many cases, they're just trying to figure out who they are. And that's the safest place that they can be at that time. So, even as we think about ways in which we can encourage coaches to be able to go out and recruit and be proud of the variety and the difference that is on their team. Stephanie, are there any recommendations that you have kind of from a leadership standpoint or from the institution to really be able to encourage that in a way where folks can go out and recruit and know that they have the backing of the institution?
One, I have to apologize. I was responding to a question that I received in the Q&A. So Nevin, would you restate the first part of that question?
Absolutely. Yeah. I just wanted to know, in terms of coaches going out to recruit, if they ever get a question such as, do you have any LGBT athletes on the team? How can the athletic department or the institution really support the coaches in that process?
For me, and again, this may be the wrong answer, but for me, being your true self, your genuine self, and speaking the truth. I know as a person of color, I always get that question from parents when they ask about sending their children to the South. And at the end of the day, you have to speak the truth on what your institution is, but also speak to where you're trying to go. So for me, I've always erred on the side of, let's be honest and tell the truth and where we are, who we are.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. And I think that's important too, because when coaches get that question, they should be able to turn around and talk about the things that the institution values, right? Their athletic department, student athletes from all racial backgrounds and identities, from different sexual orientations. And it's just reflective of the world and the community. So I think, being able to celebrate difference as an athletic department is extremely important. So thanks, Stephanie.
But at the end of the day, the truth will come out. I mean, those schools are going to come to your campus and it's like, well, what is this place?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. So what I want to do, we have about 5 minutes. We have one question that's in our Q&A. And Stephanie, this question is for you. Let's see. It's from Megan Williams at UNC Chapel Hill, and it just asks, who can we talk to on our campuses to fight against policies that can be seen as discriminative?
Yes, and I will send in a note, and that's a great question. And I think the first thing you have to do is voice your concern. Make that group aware of your concern there. But unfortunately, a lot of times for public institutions, those decisions are made at the state level. As we are in an election year, the importance of voting, voicing your concerns with your state legislatures is important. You have to start there. But another avenue that I would encourage someone to utilize on their campus is, if they have one, the Women's Commission or a Women's Committee that is working to forward women initiatives on their campus. But like I said, from a state institution, they're state decisions, and get out and vote.
Mm-hmm. I go back to the education piece, you know, marriage equality, homosexuals, you know, having families at a rate that we didn't see in the 80s, 90s. And so some of this is uncharted water for people, and whether it's intentional or not, you know, to Stephanie's point, speak up about it and maybe bring it to someone's attention, because perhaps the person that's in the position of leadership, their mind doesn't go to those places. You know, the idea that, you know, that two women, you know, would like to, I mean, we have one of the greatest, you know, when I talk about the WNBA and our ability to be so much more than basketball. Look what we did in the CBA in terms of not only supporting moms, but supporting women who, you know, who want to plan for children with their spouses who happen to be women. These are things that have never been done before. And so I think that it showed tremendous, you know, the thoughtfulness, very intentional, inclusive. And so I think the same things can happen, but oftentimes people don't think of it. So I don't necessarily think it's always malicious, but maybe just the mindset that it just didn't come to mind for them. So exactly as Stephanie said, finding ways to use your voice to speak on it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I also feel like it's nothing like the collective voice. So the more that you can kind of identify the folks in the department, and kind of going back to allyship, but the folks in the department that are willing to speak up to support across difference, and use that momentum to then go to leadership to say, hey, these are some concerns that we're bringing as a result of, you know, our experiences, or even just in hearing from student athletes. Because if we can center their experiences as we're pushing for the policy change, then folks are more inclined to say, okay, let's see what we can do, or at least take a look at it and be really, you know, intentional about supporting the process. So we have one more question, and in this one, I'm going to open it up to, you know, whoever would like to answer it. Or how do Black women administrators come off as not being just a token for diversity?
I am the only minority on our senior leadership, period. And, you know, there comes a time where you really have to look at it both ways, as a positive, as a negative. I say as a positive is to understand that you use that opportunity to be the voice, and I've had to learn this. You know, I've listened to you guys talk about your experiences, and it comes with time, because in the beginning, you know, 15 years ago, me sitting at that table, I would have reacted completely different, just listen. But now understanding that I do have a place at that table, I've earned that spot at the table, but at the table I have to use my voice. And a lot of times, you know, we don't want to come across as the angry Black woman, which sometimes is okay. You got to be that person. But to speak up, stop filtering your comments sometimes because you don't want people to be uncomfortable, and use your voice. But I will say that there have been times that I have to remind those around me that as the only minority at the table, that I also do not speak for the entire race, and to advocate the reason for the need to be more diverse, because my comments are based on my personal experiences and may not be the experiences that our student athletes of color may have experienced. But I think you just have to look at it as, you know, a gift and a curse, but to use your voice. And I think we said that multiple times today, and know that, yes, you may be perceived one way, but use that opportunity and use your voice.
Absolutely.
You bring awareness and people are going to think about it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Stephanie. And I just want to, it's 4 o'clock. I just want to personally thank each and every one of you for your sentiment, your openness, your vulnerability. I really feel like you have touched lives today, and it's just so important that we're able to kind of leverage your leadership to really make the community better and stronger. So thank you for your time. I want to thank the WBCA for giving us this platform to have the conversation. And I definitely want to send a huge shout out and a lot of love to Shimmy and her colleagues on the WBCA or the Diversity and Inclusion Committee for being able to let us do this event today. So if you want to see the recording of this, it will eventually be posted to WBCA.org. To the coaching education catalog. So I just thank you all for joining us. I wish you a happy Pride, and just I'm here in solidarity. So if there's ever anything that you need or want, or just questions that you have, please feel free to reach out, and we can hopefully continue this conversation. So thank you.